Hey guys, Barrett here with Spec of Tech. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about this beast of a subwoofer right here. It's the Tonewinner D8000 Pro. It has two 15-inch drivers, 1500 watts RMS, and it is a beast in the output department. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how much of a beast that it is because I did do some measurements in my room, which I will show later on in the video. I'm also going to compare those measurements to the Tonewinner D9000, which is an 18-inch subwoofer, to show you guys the differences in output if you're kind of on the fence about which one you're looking at getting. And in the next week or two, I'm also going to compare these two subwoofers, the D8000 Pro and the D9000, to some other high output subwoofers like the JTR Captivator 2400, SBS PB16, and the Arundel 17232S, just to show you guys how they stack up versus those subwoofers, because these are on the more budget side of the high output subwoofers. Those are a little bit more expensive. So I'm going to show you guys how the output stacks up versus those. If you guys are interested in purchasing the D8000 Pro, Amir over at Summit Hi-Fi was good enough to offer us a 10% discount code, but it's only good for the first 10 purchased. So the coupon code is at the bottom of the screen here, and I've dropped links down in the description below to the subwoofer, but keep in mind again that it's only for the first 10 purchased. And at the time of this recording, the D8000 Pro is currently priced at $22.99 US dollars or $29.99 Canadian dollars, and the D9000 is currently priced at $23.99 US dollars or $31.99 Canadian dollars. And if you guys were hoping for a discount on the D9000, make sure you stay tuned for my next video because there will be a discount code for the D9000 in that video. All right, so let's get right into the review of the D8000 Pro. Let's start off with showing you guys exactly why I consider this thing a beast. I'm going to show you guys a few demos and how it violently shakes my room, but please keep in mind that my room doesn't shake like that all the time when I'm watching a movie. At normal listening volumes, I very seldom hear any shaking going on. It's only when I'm doing these demos that I crank things up to 11 to show you guys the output, and that's when things start to shake in my room. I hope that those demos do show you guys, or at least help put things into perspective as to how much output the subwoofer is putting out. It really does violently shake my room. So if you're looking for a subwoofer that has that high output, this is definitely something that you should have on your list, especially if you want one that also has a really good chest thump or a nice hard-hitting bass. I do find that this D8000 Pro has a really nice hard-hitting bass as well, which really does make it great for music as well if you do want to use this thing for music. There does seem to be a little bit of a stigma on large subwoofers not being very musical, but I want you guys to keep in mind that a large subwoofer that has like two 15-inch drivers like this, or even an 18-inch subwoofer like the D9000, they don't have to use very much of their excursion at all to produce louder SPLs of that bass that you'd be experiencing in a song, whether it be a dynamic bass sequence or something along that lines. But 8-inch, 10-inch, or 12-inch, they're going to have to use a lot more of their excursion, in some cases probably close to their X-Max or at their X-Max, to produce that signal, which is going to introduce distortion. So technically, if we want to get technical, in a lot of cases, a large subwoofer is going to be producing those signals with far less distortion versus a smaller subwoofer. So to answer the question whether or not I believe this subwoofer can be musical, yes, I believe it can be, especially if it's integrated properly into your system. It's not going to be overbearing if it's integrated properly. Now, if you don't integrate it properly, then yes, it's going to have a lot more bass than what you're used to. If you just crank everything up, it's going to sound unbalanced. But as long as you balance it with your mains, I don't think you're going to be able to tell the difference between this large subwoofer and a smaller subwoofer unless you start pushing things to the limits, in which case this subwoofer is going to handle it a lot better than a smaller subwoofer. So yes, it absolutely can be musical, but where it truly shines, of course, is in home theater, because it does have that beastly output. So when you are watching movies and you do have those highly dynamic bass scenes, something like Blade Runner 2049, the opening scene is pretty dynamic with bass. The race scene in Ready Player One. Again, there's a lot of bass in that scene. This subwoofer is going to annihilate your room, so to speak. It's going to be able to produce those high SPLs, those dynamic scenes in movies like that with ease, and it is going to shake your room, it's going to shake your chair. And how it's able to do that is the fact that it has 1500 watts RMS as well as those two 15-inch drivers. So essentially, it's somewhat like having two of the Tonewinner D6000 subwoofers just stacked on top of one another. Now I'd like to address the six-eyed elephant in the room, and that's the fact that this subwoofer does have 6 ports on the front. Now, if you don't like the ports, you can easily cover it up with the included grill. I did reach out to Tonewinner's engineers to ask them why exactly they used 6 ports versus something like a slot port or just 3 larger ports. Unfortunately, they are on holidays and they weren't going to be able to get back to me in time to make this video. In the past, they did give a brief explanation, and if I remember correct, it was something along the lines of being able to keep the ports shorter on the inside of the cabinet while also reducing chuffing. And that's something that I can actually vouch for on the D8000 Pro and the D9000 for that matter, is the 6 ports do seem to really reduce chuffing. I've had other subwoofers in this room, for example, the SVS PB16, which does have 3 larger ports. And when you push that thing, especially with scenes like the Edge of Tomorrow opening scene, you're going to hear a lot of chuffing. I'm not trying to slam SVS here, but that's just the facts. I think it's pretty much commonly known now when you push those subwoofers, you do hear some very audible chuffing. And I'm not trying to pick on the SVS PB16s here, guys. It's just because I've personally had them in my room. I've personally experienced them. And when I did push them, I personally experienced the chuffing that I was experiencing from those 3 larger ports. So for Tonewinner to go with those 3 larger ports isn't necessarily going to be a better thing. It might be better aesthetically. You might not like the look of 6 ports, but I can tell you right now that I've pushed these subwoofers to their limits with the Edge of Tomorrow opening scene. And yes, you can hear a little bit of chuffing, but it's not very audible. It's not nearly as loud as some of the other subwoofers that I've experienced in my room that have smaller ports that are high output like this. So yes, it may not look good, but I'm telling you right now, there's something to having these 6 ports when it comes to port chuffing noise. And again, if you don't like the look of them, you can always cover it up with the included grill. And you guys know me, I like my magnetic grills, but with this D8000 Pro, they were trying to keep the cost down. It is on the budget side of high output. So you have a peg and grommet grill, but it does look nice enough. It has a nice sturdy wooden frame, so there's nothing wrong with the grill. I just would have preferred magnetic, but I understand that that probably would have come with a higher cost. One area I don't believe Tonewinner cut any corners on is the amplifier. Now, yes, it is putting out 1500 watts RMS, which is quite a bit of power for these two 15-inch drivers. They do claim it puts out 8000 watts peak, but take that with a grain of salt, guys. That's just going to be very short bursts. It's not going to be something that the amplifier can sustain. Yes, this amplifier is putting out plenty of power for these two 15-inch drivers, but it also includes Bluetooth connectivity, so you can connect to the Tonewinner app. And that's where I think Tonewinner really added value, considering that this is a high-output subwoofer with a lower cost versus other high-output subwoofers. I'm glad to see that they included the app because it is incredibly handy. I did state this in the D9000 review already, but this big subwoofer is most likely going to have the back of it pushed up against the wall. So you're not going to always want to slide it out to make any sort of adjustments to the amplifier if you do want to make adjustments. So you can simply connect to the Tonewinner app. And I did kind of give a rundown of the Tonewinner app in the D9000 video, so I'm not going to do it again here. But if you want to see that, I'll link it in the top right-hand corner of this video. But it adds functionality like being able to adjust something simple like the gain. You can also add PEQs, so if you want to adjust the subwoofer to balance it out in your room without using room calibration, you can do that. It also has functions like the high pass filter, low pass filter, input voltage sensitivity. So there's a lot of functionality there that they add with that app, and I'm really glad to see that they included it in these subwoofers. For those of you that aren't too keen or don't want to use the app, there is an LCD screen on the back of the subwoofer plate amp so that you can make all the same adjustments on the back of the amp using the capacitive buttons. Keep in mind that the display is mounted upside down on purpose so that when you're peering down on it when it's up against the wall like this, it will be right side up for you looking down on it. And I think all in all, they did a really good job on the amplifier. It looks modern, it looks nice, it's nothing too spectacular. I mean, it's not too flashy or anything like that, but you have that LCD screen, the capacitive buttons, and Bluetooth connectivity, which I really like. So I don't think that there were too many corners cut when they were building this subwoofer. The drivers clearly can handle quite a bit of power. It is putting out 1500 watts, and they do put out a lot of output, so clearly they can handle that, so they must be fairly well built. The amplifier is very well built, like we just discussed. There is one area that I do believe they kind of cut a corner here to help keep the cost down, and that's the fact that they're only offering it in one finish, which is a vinyl wrap that looks like black oak or black ash. So you're only going to have that one choice of finish, and it is going to be a vinyl wrap. It's not a true veneer, but of course they are keeping the cost of this high performance subwoofer quite low, so that's to be expected. It's a pretty standard vinyl black ash wrap that you're going to see on plenty of other subwoofers on the market. It does look nice enough, it has some texture to it, but it is a vinyl wrap, it's not a true veneer. But of course, like I said, they're trying to keep the cost down, and that was, I think, one of the ways that they did it. One area they definitely didn't cut any costs on is the building materials. This thing weighs 187 pounds. It's very hefty, it's very solid. So they definitely didn't skimp out on the MDF when they were building the subwoofer. So it is very heavy, and it can be difficult to move. And because of that, Tonewinner decided to put handles on either end. So when you have it laid on its side, you're going to have a handle on either end the wide way. So when you have it standing up like I have it here, you got one handle on the top and then one handle on the bottom. So the only way you can really carry it is if it's sideways, but then once you put it on the ground, you can easily just lift it up and have it standing like I have it here. But I do like the fact that they have the option to lay this on its side. So it does have feet on the bottom, like I have it standing up right here. And there's also feet on the inside right here. So if you want to lay it down on the ground to have the 6 ports along the bottom, then you can do that as well, which really does open up the doors for placement, because not everybody's going to be able to accommodate the subwoofer standing up like this, making it 36 inches tall. If you place it on its side, it's going to be 36 inches wide, but only 24 inches tall. Another area that Tonewinner clearly put a lot of effort or focus into is the performance of this subwoofer, which we're going to have a look at now with the Room EQ Wizard measurements. Keep in mind that I measured this subwoofer in the front right-hand corner of my room. That's where I measure all my subwoofers, so that in the future I can kind of compare them to each other and see their frequency response and their output levels. So it wasn't in this location when I measured it. I'm also going to show you guys the differences in measurements between the D9000 and the D8000 Pro. I know there's some of you out there that are kind of on the fence and you've been asking me about that. So hopefully these measurements will show you the differences between the output of these subwoofers and help you make a decision. I also want you guys to keep in mind that there's no room calibration activated when I measure subwoofers in my room, and that includes this one. So you are going to see some peaks and nulls, but that is my room. That's not the subwoofer. You should be able to get a flat response with this subwoofer to below 20 hertz. All right, let's hop over to my computer and have a look at the measurements and compare it to the D9000. All right, so here we're going to start off with showing you guys the differences between normal mode, strong mode, and deep mode, both in the ported configuration as well as the sealed configuration. So here we're looking at the ported configuration, and guys, this has nothing to do with max volume. This is just to show you the differences in the frequency response depending on the mode that you're using. So the blue line here is deep mode, the red line is normal, and the green is strong. So as you can see, it kind of just operates as deep mode giving you the most low end, normal mode kind of being in between the two, and then strong mode giving you the least amount of low end, but it should give you more headroom in the higher frequencies. But let's have a look at the different modes in sealed configuration. So here is sealed and deep, strong, and normal. So as you can see, the same remains true here, as you get the most amount of low end in deep mode, and you get kind of in between in the normal mode, and then you get the least amount of low end in in strong mode. And then on the higher frequencies, you get the most out of strong. So that's that. Now you kind of see what the different sound modes do to the frequency response. All right, now let's have a look at how the subwoofer performs in ported and sealed configuration in deep mode. And this is going to be compression testing, so this will be kind of the max output, at least for my room. Keep in mind that this is specific to my room, and these peaks and nulls are also going to be specific to my room. But let's start off in sealed mode, and let's have a look at where compression's set in. It looks like -12, we're definitely hitting some compression here. There's a much smaller gap, so -12 is not going to be our max output. But here at -15, it still looks pretty good. Looks like you're getting a pretty even space all the way along with our 3 dB. So we're going to say that -15 is our max output in sealed configuration in deep mode. And then let's have a look at the ported configuration in deep mode, and we'll see kind of the output differences between the two. So let's just get rid of this one for now. And obviously we're hitting compression on this red line. Not a whole lot, but there is compression there. So let's get rid of that line since this is a comparison. And I think for the most part, purple line is going to be usable. For the most part, we're getting our 3 dB, I would say. There might be some slight compression here and there, but nothing too noticeable. So let's use this purple line at -18. For the ported mode, and then the sealed was -15. So as you can see, in sealed mode, you do get a slower roll-off. Let's just do some quick comparisons because we do have lots of measurements to go through. So at 20 hertz in the ported mode, you're getting 112.3 dB, and in sealed mode you're getting 107. So that's a 5 dB increase. That's going to be something you're going to notice in the room, that you're going to experience in the room. But starting at about 13 hertz, you are going to get more output on the sealed configuration than you will on the ported. But if you're not as concerned with the output below 13 hertz, then I'd say that the best mode to use would be the ported mode. So it really depends on your use case here. If you do want more punch, then you can see that the sealed mode is going to give you a little bit more punch. But if you want more low end kind of for movies, then the ported mode is going to give you this extra dB here from about 25 hertz to the 13 hertz. Let's move on to the normal mode. All right, so here we are with the D8000 Pro with sealed and ported in their normal mode. So let's have a look at sealed first. So let's clear the ported ones here. So in the sealed configuration, you can tell that the brown line is obviously compressing, so we can't use that line. The blue line actually looks fairly good. So let's use this blue line, which is -12 in the sealed configuration as our max output. And then for ported, okay, so this blue line, we are compressing that as clear. Green line, so let's use the green as our max line for ported. So again, it's basically the same thing, same idea as the deep mode. You're going to get more output from about 28 hertz down to about 13 hertz in the ported configuration. And then they're pretty much identical from the 28 hertz mark to about 53 hertz. And then you do get a little bit more in the sealed configuration in normal mode in these higher frequencies. But there you have it. That's what it looks like in both sealed and ported in normal mode. Now let's have a look at how the subwoofer compares to the D9000, which is the 18-inch version of the Tonewinner subwoofers. Okay, so here we have the D8000 Pro in normal mode and ported configuration, and the D9000 in normal mode and ported configuration. Okay, so let's start with the D9000. The D9000, I'd say we're definitely hitting compression with this top green line. You're not getting a uniform gap between those measurements. So -15 is probably going to be our max output on the D9000. And then for the D8000 Pro, let's have a look here. So the blue line on the top is definitely compressing. This green line looks pretty good for the most part, but right here it does seem to be compressing. So let's get rid of this green line here, and we'll keep -18 as our max for the D8000 Pro. And then it was -15 for the D9000. So this is actually something I stated in the overview video, where you do get a little bit more low end out of the D9000. Now again, I was being pretty strict on the D8000 Pro for 0 compression. So this max output at 18, we could probably add another 2 dB or so. We were getting some very slight compression at -15, so probably at -16, which would put it closer to the D9000, and then you'd probably be seeing a little bit more frequencies over in the higher end. But like I said, to be strict, this is what you're looking at. You're getting more output from the D9000, but just for curiosity's sake, let's have a look at the D8000 Pro with that -15, because there was some very slight compression there, and that makes them a lot closer. As a matter of fact, you're getting a little bit more with the D8000 Pro, but there was a little bit of compression there. So basically how I break it down is you're going to get slightly more output in the higher frequencies with the D8000 Pro, but you're going to get slightly more output in the lower frequencies with the D9000 if you're comparing exactly apples to apples. That's basically the gist of these subwoofers. I do find that the D8000 Pro seems to hit a little bit harder, a little bit sharper, and I do find that the D9000 Pro has a little bit more output. Now let's have a look at these subwoofers actually working together, so the D8000 Pro and the D9000 in my room at the same time. All right, so here we are with both the D8000 Pro and the D9000 operating at the same time in my room. And guys, these subwoofers absolutely destroy my room. So these are in both in normal mode with their ported configuration. So they're both in their ported configuration and both in normal mode. And this is how they look like in my room combined. So at -12, you are getting some compression here, so we can't use that line as our max output. But I think this green line's looking pretty good versus the orange line below it. The gap looks pretty good. And again, once you get to the lower frequencies, you are going to see anomalies because these subwoofers aren't really tuned for these really low frequencies. So you are going to see some anomalies down there. But for the most part, in the operating frequency of this subwoofer, that's looking pretty good. So let's use this green line as our max output. And together, these subwoofers are putting out almost 120 dB at 20 hertz. They're putting out basically 120 dB at 32 hertz. And at 15 hertz, they're putting out 111 dB together, which is just crazy output. This is output that is just going to shake your room violently, and that's exactly what I experienced when I run these subs together. It is crazy good output. Now, as you can see, they do work fairly well together, the D8000 Pro and the D9000. The frequency response looks the same together as they do look separate. So they are working pretty well together. There doesn't seem to be any major cancellations. Now, these nulls and peaks that you're seeing are my room. It's not the subwoofers not being able to work together. They do seem to sum quite well because we are getting significantly more output running them together versus running one on its own. So if you guys are wanting to pair two D8000 Pros or two D9000s, this is pretty close to what you're going to look like for running those two together. Like I said, this is a D8000 Pro and a D9000 together, but they're so similar. Their frequency response is pretty close. You may get another 2, 3, maybe 4 dB in the D9 if you're pairing two D9000s in the low end, but you're going to get probably the same amount, 2 to 3 to 4 dB more in the higher frequencies if you're going to pair two D8000 Pros together. So my recommendation remains the same. If you're looking for more punch, the D8000 Pros, and if you want more than one of them, by all means, it's going to be pretty crazy output in your room, but it's going to be more punch. And then if you want more low end, then you're going to want to go with the D9000, which is going to give you 2 to 3 to 4 dB more in the low end, which is going to shake your room so violently and still have pretty incredible punch as well, but not quite as much punch as the D8000 Pro. But there you have it, guys. These subwoofers do have fantastic output. There's no question about it. I am going to release a video of comparing these subwoofers to some other subwoofers that I've measured in my room, like the JTR Captivator 2400, possibly the Arundel 17232V, and just for fun, maybe the SVS PB16 Ultra. I don't have measurements of the Ultra single in my room. I only have measurements of 2 of them in my room. So I'm going to be comparing 2 SVS PB16s to a single D8000 Pro and a single D9000, and I think you guys will be pretty surprised at how that all stacks up, even to the JTR Captivator 2400. So make sure you stay tuned on the channel for that video. But that's all the room measurements that I have for you guys today. As you can see, the D8000 Pro is still a beast. The D9000 Pro is also a beast, but there's those slight differences in low end and high end frequencies depending on what you're looking for. But I hope that these measurements helped you. Let's continue with the review. As you guys could see from the room measurements, it does have really good performance down to 15 hertz. I hope that you guys do find those measurements helpful. I know that I do when I'm looking at a product. It is nice to see how it measures, even though it is in other people's room. It does give you a general idea of how that subwoofer is going to perform. And make sure that you guys do stay tuned on the channel for the comparison that I'm going to be comparing the D8000 Pro and D9000 to other subwoofers like the JTR Captivator 2400, the Arundel 17232V, and dual SVS PB16 Ultras. So stay tuned for that video. But as you can see with the D8000 Pro, it is a true beast when it comes to performance and output. I think that those measurements prove that. Now, if you're looking for a subwoofer that's going to have a lot of output in the single-digit frequencies, this isn't a subwoofer that's going to provide that, but it does have really stellar output from about 15 hertz and up. And that for me is kind of the golden range, from 15 hertz and up, because most movie content or bass content in movies is going to be between that 15 hertz and up range. There are some movies out there that do have content below that 15 hertz range. Don't get me wrong, I know that that's out there, and like I said, I've pursued that myself, but for the most part, most of you are going to be happy with output from 15 hertz and up, because that's where most of the bass content is going to be in movies. That's definitely what the D8000 Pro and the D9000 for that matter do provide. They provide stellar output from 15 hertz and up, tons of output that's going to shake your room and give you that violent sort of bass, especially if you're going to have 2 of them in your room. If that is what you're looking for, I've dropped links to these subwoofers down in the description below. And just remember, the first 10 purchased that are using this coupon code at the bottom of my screen here are going to save 10% off of the D8000 Pro. So don't forget to use that coupon code. And guys, please do consider using my links, even if I don't have a coupon code. It doesn't cost you guys anything extra, but it really does help out the channel. Full transparency, I do reinvest most of what I make from YouTube or from the affiliate links back into other equipment that I can bring in for review, or I can show you guys the measurements on subwoofers and share my opinion on these products. So it really is reinvested into the channel. So I really appreciate when you guys do use those links. Remember to enjoy your systems. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.